up, everyone? This is the Jack of One Trade podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Woodington, and I'm joined here today by published author and Thomas Nelson professor, Mrs. Janice Hoffman. It's so awesome to have you here today. One of the topics I wanted to talk about today was writing and the process of writing, what inspires you to write, because I know that you're a published author. It's really awesome to have you here on our podcast today.
Thank you, Morgan. It's so nice of you to think of me. I really appreciate that you thought of me and invited me, and I'd love to share whatever you would like and just encourage people to write and read.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember being in your class a little while back, actually a couple months back. It's been a while, but you used to have a lot of sessions and such where you would show poetry and writing, and I just thought it was really great because it allows students to not only express themselves, but you were also able to show some of the things that you have written in the past as well. And if you'd like to, I would love if you would talk about some of the books that you have written and published.
Well, thank you. I will. I'll start with, let me see. This one, it's called Soul Cookies. I have to make sure people don't think it's a cookbook. So it says the poetry of Janice Hoffman. But I'm one of those people, I think so many people, just about everybody has a book in them. And, but we never do anything with it. So a few years ago, I got to thinking, I'm older now, so I don't have as much time as I used to. So it's now or never. And so I collected some of my favorite poems that I'd written over the years, and I have them in a collection and submitted it, had some endorsements and submitted it to a publishing company, a legitimate publishing company, and I was thrilled that they accepted it. And so it's called Soul Cookies, and it's primarily free verse poetry. It has a little bit of traditional poetry with the rhymes and all that, but that was just really fun to write, and just kind of one of those dreams you have. And so I finally got that done, so I was happy about that. And that was a couple of years ago. That winter, I love little kids, and so I have these. When I was a little girl, my mom told me all these stories about fairies, and so as I'll share a little bit later, but as you know, I've had some dark events in my life. So the fairies help. They're the lighter side. They're kind of therapeutic, and so I have a fairy book called Four Fairy Friends. Let me show you my little friends, and notice they're multicultural. Okay, I have all my different fairies, and they've become these real little creatures in my head. In my head, like the first one is, let's see, they're not in order, but that's Poppy, and that's Dally, and that's Nutmeg, and that's Rose, and they've become these real little characters in my head. But the artwork, my illustrator just did a wonderful job with the artwork.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. It's so pretty.
Fun. Well, what I wanted to do, I got to thinking about how they were multicultural, and I wanted to reach out to other, all kinds of little kids. And so my husband is a retired high school administrator, but he's also a retired Spanish teacher. So he translated the fairy book into Spanish. So I have.
Oh, that's awesome.
Isn't that neat? I love it. It's Cuatro Amigas Hadas. And it's bilingual because it still has the English in it, but it has the Spanish side by side. But unfortunately, these two came out, and the third one, let me pull this one out. This is just an accompanying coloring book, and it's the publisher came up with this as something for the children. It's had a really good response, except COVID. When I had 2 years ago, when Soul Cookies came out, I had wonderful book tour in Virginia, Indiana, and Kentucky, and it was just really a wonderful event, and I loved it. But this last year, the pandemic shut things down, so the publisher's working with us on some more creative ways to market things, and that's why I'm thankful for this podcast. I can let people know about it. I have another collection of poetry that I'm working on for next year. I have a Christmas fairy book ready for this winter, but what recently came out was Azaleas in October, and this is the one I was telling you about. The subtitle of this is Surviving the Loss of a Child to Suicide. because 10 years ago we lost our son to suicide. And initially, writing was so therapeutic for me because I would just write and write and write, and it really helped a lot. And so then when I got to the point where there's some type, you're never the same. So you're never like, okay, I'm well now. No, my son is gone forever.
Yeah, I mean, things change forever after something like that.
Exactly. There's a new normal. But I want to encourage other people, other mothers who've lost children, other people who have lost a loved one to suicide, or by any means, any kind of tragic means, that you can have hope for the future. You just have a different life, but you can go beyond surviving. You can. What I want this to do is to help other people, to give them hope. But the beginning's pretty raw, and then toward the end, I hope to give hope. You want me to read one out of here?
Yeah, that would be great. And I can't even tell you, just speaking about that, hearing you speaking about that, how much a book like that means to people. And I mean, it would mean something to people years ago and years into the future as well, but especially right now, because so many people have lost family members because of COVID and had to deal with these changes. And as you mentioned, the new normal without that person there.
I appreciate you saying that, because it's true. Their suicide rate is up. It was already terrible, and now it's up because of COVID. And if people have hope, they can hang on, because this will change. Everything changes, but it's just when you're in the middle of it. And you mentioned people losing people to COVID. I lost my brother this past last summer in August to COVID. He had cancer, but he contracted COVID, and that's what killed him. Took him out sooner than we thought it would be. And so it's hard. But I want to read one near the end, Azaleas in October. This is just a chapbook. A chapbook is just a small collection. It's not, like a regular book. It's just maybe, 18 or 20 poems, something like that.
No, you said that's called a chapbook. Chapbook, okay. Because I've heard of novellas before, but I don't know if that's just a fantasy type book thing.
No, a novella is just a small little piece of fiction. And the chapbook can be fiction, or it can be poetry. Of course, mine's poetry. But chapbook is just like a really smaller edition of a larger piece, I guess. Or actually, it can stand alone. But what I chose to read for you here is, the title of the book is Azaleas in October, and the title of this poem is Azaleas in October. So I'll read that. Oh, well, first I'll tell you that we knew, of course, our son was suffering with a lot of medical conditions and emotional issues, and that he was depressed, and I was very, very concerned that this would happen. And you try to stop it, but sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But the week that he died, I remember looking out the front window, and it was October of 2011, and the azalea bushes had bloomed again. But they usually are like right now in March, April, May, and all that, sometimes in the summer. But it was October, and so I just was struck by that. I don't know why. I guess because I'm a poet and I write, and images, sometimes.
Yeah, but I mean, it became something symbolic to you as well. If you connected it with what had happened.
I did. So I'll read this. It does have an essay at the end about walking through grief and it has some resources too to help people. But one of the last poems, Azaleas in October. When they left, I looked out, and would be the two police officers and the chaplain who came to the house.
Okay.
When they left, I looked out the window and saw our azalea bush was again in full bloom. And this line burned in my mind. The year our son died, our azaleas bloomed again in October. I stared and memorized the irony. I know our azaleas will bloom again in the spring, but I will remember October. For the rest of my life, I will remember October. And each October, when others celebrate 1492 and discoveries, I will mourn your precise decision your violent departure, that you did it your way. But now I must celebrate you like we do all the others who leave us behind. So I pray for redemption, to be thankful in the midst of mourning. Your ashes rest on our Virginia bookshelf, but your eyes give sight to two strangers. Your bones give healing, your tendons grant strength, and your skin saves burn victims. I look to the skies and am thankful for the color blue, your favorite. I'm on a pilgrimage to find appreciation, thankful for your love, thankful for your last texts, thankful for Azaleas in October. So that's, you know what I always like to do after I do that serious one? Let me go to soul cookies, because I like to show a variety, you know, not just everybody's all sad, and you know, we all have these events. We all have, you know, where we have life and joy, and we have death and sorrow. But so after I do something that's sad, I want to share something funny. So this is one that I usually don't rhyme, but I thought this was funny because now that I'm older, you know. So this is now that I'm old. I once was young and thin and tall. This was before cataracts, after all. But now I'm short and fat and old, with several fake parts, if truth be told. A defibrillator controls my heart. My CPAP helps my lungs restart. I also find it quite ironic that titanium hips now make me bionic. But if there's hope somewhere to be found, it's that I'm still on top of the ground. So there's a little bit of variety there.
Yeah, it's a very nice dynamic between the two poems as well.
Isn't that life, though? We have joy, we have sorrow, and it's that, I know it's a cliche, but it's true, that roller coaster of life, you know.
Yeah, it is true. Your first poem was very, very touching. It has a lot of meaning to it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was very therapeutic for me to write. That you know, there's counseling, there's medicine, there are people have their faith, there are groups, there are, you know, there's all these excuse me, all these different avenues we have to help us through things like this. But for me, and I tried a little bit of all of them, but for me, what really helped was the writing. It was therapeutic, just to pour my I mean, I'm a mother who lost her child, to pour my consuming grief onto pages, just to deal with it somehow, because it was so hard to talk about. So I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and I typed and wrote and I typed, and then later, you know, I came back and kind of pulled some of it together. But it's therapeutic. Writing is helpful. It really helps.
Yeah, it's so kind that you chose to take everything that you wrote out of a product, the sorrow and emotions that you were feeling, and turn it into something that other people can see. Because I really think when people are going through tough times like that, just seeing that they're not alone makes a huge difference. And it's a little thing, but it really does make a huge difference in people's lives.
You hit on it right there, that you're not alone, that somebody else understands. You know, you're right. What you said is exactly right. And that's what I want to do. I want to encourage other people. Either they're not alone, or that they'll survive, that they can smile again. I even had a lady in Pennsylvania who emailed me and said, excuse me, she hasn't experienced anything like this, but she said when she read it, it made her want to be a better listener. So yay, you know, so if it can help anybody in any way, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's wonderful. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is actually about your writing process. When you sit down to write, I know you touched on it a little bit, but when you sit down to do your writing, do you typically have to prep beforehand? Like, do you have to get your tea brewing and get the music on in the background, or can you just kind of sit down as inspiration hits you and stare onto that intimidating blank page and put some words out onto it?
Yeah, we can go through those moments where it's like, I have nothing, page is blank. But unlike a lot of people who set aside time, my life is so busy and so full, so too full, because I'm still teaching and I'm a member of poetry groups, and I edit the newsletter for the Poetry Society of Virginia, and I just have, and then my family, of course, just a lot going on. So I don't set time aside. However, I try to stay open to inspiration. Sometimes it might just be something I see. Like one time I was driving, this was a few years ago, I was just driving through town, and over on the side of the road, there was this black crow. I remember it was October. It was in the fall because the leaves were turning, but this crow was waddling around in the grass, and it just, that image struck me. So I ended up writing a poem with 4 stanzas, and the crow began in the fall, and then I had 3 other birds, 1 for each stanza, and I wrote this poem, and then it was published in what was it, Snowy Egret, I think, which is a literary magazine, a nature literary magazine. And then it was, I think I had it in my book too. So sometimes it's just something I see. Sometimes it's like with my son, it was the emotions and the thoughts racing through my brain and everything. Sometimes it's an idea. Sometimes it might just be a word. Like, I like words, and there'll be a word that will just stick in my mind, and I'll just go off and do something with that. Or it might be an event, like a birth. I wrote one recently about the birth of our grandson, who's now your age. But I remember that, and so I tied in some things about like Aquarius and all that. And I'm not, into all that. However, I'm
The horoscopes. Yeah.
yeah. But I do tie in like some mythology and things like that. So, you can be inspired by anything. I can be looking at my dog sleeping. We have 2 labs, and one barks in his sleep. And so I think that's hysterical. But things like that, what's he thinking? What's he dreaming? And all that. So it could be, just anything. I'm very, I guess I'm weird. I'm very susceptible to images and ideas and words and things. And so when something like that happens, I will just like jot it on a piece of paper. And then I might have a list of things. And then I'll come and sit down and put it in the file. I'll type it, and I might develop a poem at that time, or I might come back to it later. And oh yeah, I forgot about that. But if I will write it and then type it, I have that image so that I don't forget it, because pictures really speak to us, visual, concrete imagery. And so if I can keep that fresh, then I can write about it some more. But then after the inspiration and the writing, then there's the work. That's the fun part. Then it's the editing and the revising and doing a different word, or, this line's too long, it needs to be shorter, or all that, all that kind of thing. And then after I'm finished with all of that, then it's like marketing. Now what do? Do I just enjoy it, let it sit on my computer? Do I send it to a literary magazine? Do I save it for a book? What am I going to do with it? I think this poetry needs to be shared. And I just found out not too long ago that there's a big resurgence of poetry these days. I think, is it Amanda Gorman? Is that her name? The young youth poet laureate that read at the inauguration recently. So that's helped a lot of people become more aware of poetry. Songwriters, my students.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody.
One thing that I absolutely believe is that inspiration is contagious. I think that for me, and like you said, sometimes inspiration is random. Like you see a rock and you're like, suddenly I want to write about the mountains in Virginia.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really random, but sometimes it's just contagious, because you see people that have written and made pictures and wrote books and movies and such on inspirational topics, and it just inspires you to do something similar.
You are so right. I have a few favorite contemporary poets, and I like to read a lot of poetry. I don't have time to read much. I think it's another thing I like about poetry. You know, you have little snippets instead of like a 300-page book.
Yeah.
These little soul cookies. That's why I call it soul cookies. These little morsels here. And there are a few people that when I read their poetry, it really inspires me. So I'll keep a notebook, and I'm not plagiarizing. I'm not copying what they say, but they inspire me about a similar thing, event or image or something. So yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I've done the same thing before. And sometimes I'll even do it with things that people say. Like people will say the most inspiring, amazing, motivational stuff, and it never gets written down. And I'm like, y'all, you got to save this.
That's
This is
right.
good.
It
You can
is.
read this like 20 years from now, and it might, it might make a difference.
It's true. It really is. It's true.
But in your opinion, what would you say is one of the more difficult aspects of writing? I know you mentioned a little bit about finding time. I know that's difficult to find time to write, but are there things that you find just make it a more difficult process, or things that hinder you from being able to write?
Writing itself, other than the time, probably no, because in the end we do what we want to do, so I might be up at 3 o'clock in the morning writing or something. So if I'm really inspired, I'll go ahead and write something, or I'll take time away from something else. But the hardest thing for me, especially during the pandemic, is the marketing, getting it out there, sharing it, because you want to share it. We can't have book signings. Well, they're just now starting. I think I'm supposed to do something for the library in a couple weeks, and then there's a bookstore here in Williamsburg that is very friendly to local authors and might be able to do a book signing there. But this whole last year, we haven't been able to do any of that. So the marketing is hard. You do Facebook, and I have a new website, and we have emails. I mean, that's kind of old, but just trying to get it out there, or sharing, like I'll share somebody else's, maybe their post, and they'll share mine, just to get the information out there, do a blog, that kind of thing. So for me, the marketing is the hardest part, because you just want to, a writer just wants to write. We don't market. I'm not a business person. I don't want to do that. But it is fun to get with people. So if we can connect with people, then that makes it less painful.
Yeah. I can see how it would be a little bit awkward as a writer to do marketing as well, because like you said, it's almost like a different trade in a way. I remember when I was in a club when I was in high school, and we did some fundraisers and such, and we had to ask people for money to donate, and that's a really difficult thing to do. It's difficult to ask people to donate to a cause.
You're in your club, you want to do what you do, and that's just part of the creature, part of they say the animal.
Yeah.
But anyhow, the writing part, yeah, and you mentioned the time, just finding the time, and that's my own fault, because I'm overcommitted. I've cut back on a few things, and I'm still a little overwhelmed, but that's okay. I'm living. I'm living a full life, regardless of joys and sorrows. Our days are numbered, so I want mine to be full, and they are.
That's wonderful. I love what you just said about how you want them to be full and how days are numbered, because it's true. And I'm young right now, but it's definitely something that pops up in my mind every once in a while. If I want to do something and I know it's going to be good and benefit me in the future, I should just do it. I shouldn't keep pushing it back.
You should. I want to encourage you to do it. Whatever's on your heart, do it.
One of the questions that have actually become very popular on some of my podcasts is the one that you've actually answered a couple of times now about the pandemic. I'll ask, how has the pandemic affected you? And as I said, you've answered that a few times. I can see how it would be difficult to market books during this time, because it's the signings and things of that sort. You just can't do that in person.
Yeah, and like I said, 2 years ago I had a book tour, and it was wonderful. That was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And as an individual, the government has all these wonderful free grants and all that, but most of them are for organizations, not individual writers. And I do still have my teaching So I can't say I'm unemployed or, you know, I don't have food on the table. That's not true. My husband's retired. We're okay. But it's harder to sell books, you know.
Yeah.
But the pandemic itself, it's for me, I guess because I'm older, because I'm a social person. When I was younger, I was pretty, I was more introverted. I'm not now, but when I was younger, I was. And so for a lot of people, it's just been really, really hard being quarantined. But I think where I am at this stage in my life, I'm on the computer every day. I have, like, this is my third Zoom today. I taught a class. I met with the publisher. I'm talking with you. I'm grading papers. I'm writing. You know, we've got the Poetry Society of Virginia. I have work to do with that. And like I said, I have a family. I've lost my son, but I still have my husband and my daughter and her husband. I still have my mother, who will be 90 this summer.
Oh,
Isn't that awesome?
yeah, that's really cool.
I said, keep breathing, Mama, keep breathing. And a grandson your age. And so, you know, there's a lot going on. He and I are going to go to Indiana to see my mom as soon as school's out. And then when we get back, he and my husband and I are going to go up to New England, and our son's mom is going to stay with the dogs. I mean, it's just, you know, life. My life is very, I said full. It is full. It's very busy. So I don't have the depression that a lot of people are dealing with from the pandemic, from the quarantine, because I by choice have stayed extremely.
You kept busy.
Yeah. And that's a choice. But then, you know, at night I'm tired and I plop down in the chair next to my husband and I binge watch BritBox or Netflix or something like that. But I know that for many people it's just been terrible. You know, I know when I was younger I would have gone crazy or something because I like to be out and going and doing. So I know it's a challenge, but there are things that we can do to, you know, to address it. Do you know, and you have probably read some of these things, oh gosh, I can't remember the details now, but if you look up like 1000 AD, during the plague, that's when a lot of classic ancient literature was written, because people were quarantined. The ones who quarantined themselves, people who were out were dying, but the ones who quarantined wrote voraciously. And so we have the Decameron and all these other stories that were written during either a plague or a pandemic or an epidemic, you know. So there are ways to be productive even with something terrible going on in Earth.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad you mentioned that. I had not heard about the literature and poetry being written during that time, but I actually read an article earlier today.
Did you?
It was saying how a lot of the hobbies that we still do today came around during pandemic times when people were trying to entertain themselves.
Yeah. And just think, they didn't have Zoom, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have TV, radio, nothing. They had each other, they had music, they made, like you said, they made up games, they sang, they wrote. You know, we're not the first ones. I wrote a funny poem called "This Is Not My First Rodeo," about the beginning of the pandemic, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think it comes out this spring in another literary journal. But I grew up in the 50s when you have all the cowboy shows on TV and everything was about, you know, cowboys and cowgirls and all that kind of stuff. And so I tie in all these cowboy images. But when I was a kid, there was a polio epidemic, and my neighbor had polio, and she was in an iron lung and she had braces and all that. And we had measles, we had mumps, there was no vaccine. We dealt with all of that. And I had a girl in the 3rd grade whose father had TB, and their home there was a sign on their door that said "Quarantine, do not enter." And I was thinking about the different events in our life and in my generation's life, the things that we have been through, and most of us have survived, you know. So this too shall pass. Everything changes. It's, you know, it's a challenge now. There's a lot of heartache, but there are a lot of possibilities, and it won't be like this forever. So, but I wish I could remember some of the words in my silly poem because I thought it was funny.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be really good. I grew up watching a lot of westerns and such too because we had more of a free, not really cable, just kind of a satellite type TV. So I know a lot of the westerns that you're talking about,
Yeah,
or at least some of them.
yeah. Well, like my brother and I would, like if we did Lone Ranger and Tonto. Well, I was a girl, so I had long hair and I had braids, so I would be Tonto and he would be the Lone Ranger. Or if we did Gunsmoke, he was Marshall Dillon and I was Miss Kitty. And oh, it's funny. I think it's funny.
I do expect a lot of different literary works to come out as a product of this pandemic. It's interesting because I was actually thinking about maybe a week ago, I was thinking about how pre-pandemic I was reading, actually maybe closer to 2 or 3 years ago, but we kind of went through this phase with the YA fantasy where everything was this post-apocalyptic world. Like everything was, the world is ending and this is a new world, and this 16-year-old girl has to look past her love triangle and save everyone in the world.
Gosh. And that can be scary when you're, especially when you're young, because you've got your whole life ahead of you. So that's what I want to tell everybody. Nope, this is not it. This is not the end. Hang on.
So it'll be interesting to see what some of the new books will be in the next 10 years or so. I definitely think there will be a shift in some of the topics that you'll see in the literature.
And you mentioned too, you're right too, there's a whole lot of writing going on because people are inside. I think I read something a week or so ago that there were more books published last year than there have been in several years. So people are writing, and there will be a record.
See, that makes me very excited because I'll say it right here on the podcast. I'm a book nerd. I'm a bookworm, a book dragon. And I'll tell you the truth, collecting books and reading books, to me, those are two different hobbies. I've got a ton of books that I still haven't read yet, but I still keep buying them because I can't stop myself.
That's good. That's good. You know, the more you read, the smarter you are. The less, and conversely, the less you read, I won't finish that sentence. But I mean, anything. It could be a comic book or a graphic novel, whatever, just read. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really expands kind of your world to read, even if it's not, what is it, nonfiction. I forgot the word for a second. I read fiction books all the time. But even if it's not nonfiction books, I've learned a lot of stuff from fiction books that I just feel like has improved me in some way. Like I've learned something from it.
That's right.
Even if it's not always practical to everyday life.
You do. The more you know, the smarter you are. And it enhances your life. It enhances your own writing, but also your relationship with other people. The more you know, the more you read, the more well-rounded you are. And it just really helps in every area. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the fairies behind you on your wall here, and I know you talked about them a little bit, but one of the things I was wondering is the book that has the fairies in it, and I know you just told me the name of it, but I forgot it. Is that aimed more towards a younger audience?
It's fixed so it could be a picture book for preschoolers, or it could be for early readers. The language is very simple, and it's in a poem. It's a poem. It says, "First there's Poppy, so cheery and bright. Her hair's all yellow. Oh, what a sight. And there she is with her wild yellow hair." And it goes on like that. So that's a good question. Yeah, the range could be 2 to 10. And what's really been fun that I really have enjoyed is getting the feedback from people who, their daughter or granddaughter or niece or somebody read it and loves the fairies and all that. And in fact, I told you they're multicultural, and I have an African American. Well, she wouldn't be American. Fairies are usually Celtic, but anyhow, I have a black fairy, and I had a man, an African American man, was looking at my book, and he bought one for his granddaughter. He said, "I've never seen a black fairy," and he loved it, and I was so happy. It really touched my heart. But there she is singing in the woods. Did my illustrator do a beautiful job? Isn't that sweet?
Yeah, she did. That is beautiful.
It says she warbles and chants and hums a sweet tune from morning till night in the light of the moon. So this was just pure joy. That was fun. And I wanted to bring joy to children. It's just a little more expensive. Children's books are pretty marketable, except like when they have these beautiful illustrations, they're expensive to make.
Yeah, I bet.
But I appreciate you asking about it. But it was just lots of fun. You know, I just, like I said, I'm a little bit weird, and I just, I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'll stop. It was,
You're fine. You're fine.
I was sitting in the doctor's office a few years ago, and waiting. And
As
you know,
one does.
as one does. And you know how the light comes through the blinds, and then you'll have all these little tiny dust particles that are shining. Well, I don't do drugs or anything. I don't need to. My brain is already pretty creative. And I just like envisioned this little fairy flying around, and she got this. Gosh, if you play this, people will think I'm crazy. Anyhow, then one of her friends joined her and all that. So I wrote a poem about her, and that was kind of the catalyst for the fairy book, because I thought it was just so much fun. I think little children, they like fairies. They like fantasy. I was talking to my husband the other day about, when we were little and when our kids were little, and Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and fairies. And, that fantasy is important to children. It helps their creative genius. It helps them. Math and science we have to have them, and that's part of it. But so are the arts. We have to have this creative side to, express ourselves or to, to take in.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I'll say something that might make what you said sound a little less crazy. And it didn't sound crazy to me anyway, just to tell you. But I've heard from several writers that, and I actually do this a little bit too, when you're writing a book, your characters become like real people in your mind, because you kind of have to envision like the scenes that they're in and how they would talk to each other. And it's almost in a way like a role-playing game where you don't necessarily become the characters, but they become more human, more alive. So you're able to
on a life. They take on a life of themselves.
Yeah.
It's like these are real little characters. I keep wanting to say people, they're not people, they're fairies. But they're
no, but they feel that way when you're the writer, because you created them and they have like their lives of their own and such in the book.
But it's fun. And I want to encourage everybody to write, because I think everybody, especially, I used to say, you might be too young now, but do you remember the Muppets?
I do, yes.
You remember the Muppet Babies?
No.
Well, years ago, gosh, there was a cartoon show, and there were Muppet Babies, and it's when the Muppets were babies. And I tell my students, when they write, I want them to tap into that inner Muppet baby, because when you're a child, little children are just so open and so
expressive.
Yes, expressive, alert, creative. They love fairies. They love, all these things. And sometimes as we get older, that kind of gets scrubbed out of us, and it shouldn't. We should always have something magical, still a spark of that in us, And,
yeah.
And so that's what I try to tap into. It's just fun.
Kind of pulling on your inner child to write some of the stuff.
Exactly, because it's there. Too much of it gets, like I said, it gets scrubbed away, academically or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and people talk about all the time how you should be more mature and you should be so mature when you get to a certain age. But to me, maturity just means making the right choices as you get older, making choices that will improve upon your person and other people's lives and help other people out. I don't think it necessarily means losing all of your joy and your aspirations and your dreams and everything that made you a happy person. I don't think that's what maturity should be.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But do you have anything else to add to our podcast before I wrap it up?
Well, may I hawk my wares? I just want to say, my publisher helped fix a new website. I had one that was, it was okay, but it wasn't working. And so I have a new website. And it's very easy. Jan-Hoffman. jan-hoffman.com. And so my books are there. I have a few blogs and, just some background information. I still need to update. I'm still working on that. I still need to get the schedule and some things on there, but I'd love to have somebody pop in and see me. And my email is on there, my writing email. I have my school email, my personal email, and my writing email. So, but I really appreciate you letting me share, because this is a joy that this is something that gives me joy, and I appreciate it so much.
Oh, me too. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and it's such an honor to have you on the podcast today.
I loved having you in class, and I love talking with you now too. And
Thank you.
Seeing you in the future.
All right, I'm going to wrap up our podcast for Jack of One Trade. Thank you for being here today, Mrs. Hoffman, and I hope you all enjoyed this podcast.
Thank you.